and welcome to the Dental Marketing Guy Show. I'm Justin, the Dental Marketing Guy, and today it is a huge honor to be joined by a very special guest, Jayme Amos, and he specializes in helping you start a dental practice, making sure that you've got everything figured out. He's really the guru when it comes to, he's the mastermind. He's teaching dentists all over the country. What do you need to consider when starting a dental practice? Whether you're just a couple years out of dental school, you've been working with the DSOs, getting your hands speed up, or whether you've been, an associate for many, many years, and you've thought about starting your own practice. Like, why can't I jump into this? Why can't I own my own practice? Well, Jayme Amos he's heard every question there is, I'm sure, about how to start a dental practice, how to open a dental office. So we're going to delve into how you got into that. But first of all, how are you?
I'm great. Thank you for having me. This is awesome. I'm appreciative of being able to share some ideas with your audience, and excited to be able to get to know you a little bit better. I know last time you and I talked, I was dashing through an airport in Las Vegas. I forget what event I was dashing to at that point, but you and I are talking as I'm cruising on through the airport. And yeah, we love helping startups. I absolutely am enamored with the opportunity that entrepreneurialism and small business and business ownership can provide dentists, particularly with startups. We love startups, and we've had some impressive successes that inspire me and clients all over the country who are making a name for themselves, who are in practice ownership, who are highly successful, and they're completely fulfilled. There's that balance between success and fulfillment, and lots of success with zero fulfillment isn't usually what doctors want to get into when it comes to practice ownership. And I like to think that our clients have immense levels of both success and fulfillment at the same time. So startup practices all over the country, we have a blast doing it. So thank you for having me.
Yeah, I'm happy to have you. This is totally unscripted. This is kind of an interesting point that you bring up, success and fulfillment. Can you kind of define what those are and how they're distinguished from each other?
Oh yeah, sure. Well, for a dentist, oftentimes I feel bad that so many times dentists are told you should do X to create new numbers, or you should do X to create more dollars, or you should do Y to create new patient flow, or you should do Z to do more procedures of this, that, and the other thing. Sometimes that's not the answer. Sometimes the answer isn't just more of, because in some people's terms, that's just more of success. But it's not just about the money. In my opinion, the real version, the real story about business ownership, the real benefit of practice ownership is the fulfillment side. The side of the story that says, I get to have a practice that represents me well. I get to have a practice that I'm passionate and excited and enthusiastic about showing up to every day. And I get to have a practice that represents me well in my community. There are actually three big initials that we use when we're helping our clients predefine what they want in practice ownership. And they all revolve around this fulfillment topic, which is, how do you want to be known? It's the letter K. How do you want to be known in a community? And the R, how do you want to be remembered in terms of a legacy? What kind of legacy do you want to create with your practice? And G, how do you want to give? How do you want to give back to the community that you're a part of? And by predefining those, we have found doctors just step into practice ownership in a way that they didn't know they could enjoy it so much. And don't get me wrong, it's still hard work. It's still a lot of effort, but we like to cut out all the risk and increase all the fulfillment while still making them wildly financially successful too. But there's a bigger story than just the success.
Got it. Okay, well, that's really cool. So how did you get into this?
Full disclosure, so everybody knows, I'm not a dentist, but we do help doctors all over the country. It actually started with, I have a degree in international business, and I was fortunate to be overseas in Europe, and I spent time in corporate board-like rooms, training rooms of Goldman Sachs and Credit Suisse and Nestle and Dresdner Bank, companies a few people have heard of, big companies. When I came back to the States and finished my degree, I started up a business, a small business, an entrepreneurial business. We did $1 million in our first year, and we had a lot of success. We had 30-some employees at one point, and I quickly realized that I didn't love that adult daycare, as I called it back then. I didn't love this big team. But I did love the fact that I could have influence in my community. I did love the fact that I could have a small business that represented my values well. And so I started helping dentists, and the very first one was a great guy who came to me and said, "Hey, Jayme, I understand that you've had a business." At that point, I also had not only sold my business, but I had purchased a lot of real estate, commercial properties and residential properties up and down the East Coast. He had heard that I had done quite a bit of those things, real estate and small business growth. So we combined those two ideas for this dentist who we hoped to open up a startup practice for. And admittedly, I didn't fully know that everything was going to work as well as it did. But the guy had a smashing success, even back then, 10 or 15 years ago at this point. He did over $1 million in his third year. And he was so happy with the success that this surprises some people, he decided to sell his practice. So happy he decided to sell, how do you like that? To move his family to Florida. So in his case, the real power of his story is not that he just created success, but his real hope was to be able to move to Florida with his family. And the practice ownership and the net worth that he built and the ability to sell that practice, that enabled him to go pursue his long-term passions. So he could move to Florida with a big nest egg. And now he actually owns 6 practices in Florida. Great guy. So the way we got started was actually accidental by combining small business ownership and all the demographics tools and real estate strategies. They just worked so well in dentistry that we've now expanded where we're able to systematize an entire process that we now call the 13 stages. So if you wanted to cover that at all, we can talk about the 13 stages process that every practice owner could follow to open up a successful practice. And now, you know, one of the things I'm most excited about with Ideal Practices, whenever we help open a startup practice, every time they open, we simultaneously fund 10 startup businesses in third world countries. So we take some of the profits from what we do in the States with startup dental practices, and then we simultaneously provide the financing for 10 businesses in places like Rwanda or the Dominican Republic. And what happens there is people are able to start businesses like, you know, for them, a business might be buying 10 or 15 goats so they could get the milk, so they could sell the milk at the market, so they can provide income to their family and avoid the real problems with extreme poverty and restore dignity to their families and have a sense of self-empowerment. So we love entrepreneurialism, we love startups, we love being able to change lives on all those fronts. So does that kind of help explain how in the world we got here as the firm who's creating successful startups all over the country?
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. I did not think that you were, that's totally news about the helping people overseas. I didn't know anything about that. So that's really interesting. Huh. Yeah. So the 13 steps to dental practice, what can you explain those?
Yeah, it's the 13 stages to open a successful practice. And I actually set up, if it's okay, I could share a link that everybody can go access a free graph. We made a timeline. It's a visual timeline that depicts the exact sequence we still use. Years ago, I remember sitting at a table at dinner. It was kind of a dark, almost smoky room. I don't think there was smoke, but it was kind of a dark team dinner that I took everybody out to. So my team and I are sitting around this table, and we're trying to figure out where these 13 stages all sit. Now, mind you, at this point, we'd done this quite a few times, but we were still in a place where I could feel my stress rising, and I could feel myself trying to think through, how do I sequence all these in a predictable way? How do we stack up these 13 stages so that they could be followed by anybody all over the country? So that's what we did. So we defined this 13 stages graph, and now we have some free resources so people can download a copy of their own and even get training on the topic so that they can learn how to go apply it on their own if they'd like to. So the 13 stages takes people from the very first stage when they're dreaming about it all the way through 13 stages later when they have their grand opening. Pretty powerful stuff.
And let's suppose, because we've got some dentists who have already started their practices, obviously, because they're interested in marketing. Let's suppose you've been in practice for a while. Would your system apply to them, or is it mainly just the people who are just thinking about starting or just started in the last 6 months? Or who's the ideal candidate for your program?
Well, candidates for our program are one thing. We have an application process. We only accept 4 to 5 clients per month into our process. It's kind of a lengthy application process. We can only help so many because it takes so much effort and bandwidth and team resources all over the country to do this. But if people wanted to, whether or not they wanted to work with us or if it was a good fit, time would tell. But even if they wanted to try this on their own, this 13 stages process does include marketing. There's a portion in there that does include the stage of marketing. And there's a very specific time for a new practice when marketing should be released for a new practice. But we hear from existing practice owners all the time, and we hear from associates all the time who say things like this: I wish I could work in a place that fit my clinical philosophy. Or I wish I could be in a practice where the team followed my lead. Or sometimes doctors will say, I'm looking at buying a practice. I either want a second location or I'm looking to purchase my first one. And dang it, with every place I look at, there's like all this funky stuff about it that just doesn't feel right. Either the team culture is a little weird, or the equipment is all old and junky, or it's in a bad location, or the growth isn't stellar. So we hear things like that all the time from people who are considering opening up a new practice, both practice owners and doctors who are recently out of school. And this process works for everybody.
Your program, is it mainly people who are purchasing a practice or starting from scratch, or is it just, does that make a difference?
Well, what we do is open new practices. So that's all we do. We only open new practices. Actually, my director of consulting, his name is Steven. Steven has now participated in over 500 startups. So he has a funny way of saying things because he can distill 500 some practices of knowledge down to just the essence of the project. And he'll say something like this. He'll say, he said, our team at Ideal Practices, we're very good at avoiding problems. We're not so good at fixing problems.
Okay.
And I think that applies to new practices. When you open a new practice, when you open a new office, you can avoid a lot of the typical headaches, avoid the typical risks, avoid the typical disappointments that exist in purchasing a practice. Actually, get this. Do you mind if I tell you a little story of a recent client?
Yeah, absolutely. We love stories.
So get this. This is really cool. I just got off the phone with a client 2 or 3 hours ago, checking in with a woman just outside of Denver. So she opened up her practice about 3 weeks ago. She had worked with us for about 14 months before her practice was open. Now, on her 4th day in practice ownership, she had 209 patients from a cold scratch startup practice. So that's one of the powerful things about startup practices. When you set everything up the right way, when you follow the 13 stages process formulaically, when you do all those pieces the right way, doctors can have a wildly successful practice that launches right out of the gate. So for her, she was really frustrated with her associateship. On her 4th day, when she had 209 new patients, she submitted her resignation to her associateship. So she knew that she was going to be okay for the next few months. And she's off to the races. I mean, she's not the only one. We have a lot of clients who, in their first year of practice ownership, they produce over $1 million. We have clients who say, the best part about this is this practice feels like me. This now is representing my values and my clinical philosophy and what I stand for. It's not all the baggage that was dragging around behind me in the old practice. So the stories of doctors who are feeling empowered, who are fulfilled, and who are having a lot of success, they're doctors who really inspire me.
Most docs who are listening to this, or even dental students, I'm sure they operate under this traditional philosophy of, well, I want to buy a practice because it's got an existing patient pool. And then we'll transition, we'll let the patients know, we'll slowly integrate. What's the advantage of starting a dental practice from scratch compared to buying one that exists?
I don't think one option is inherently better than the other. I think for some people, buying a practice is perfect. And actually, I'm not the practice buying expert, but I can give a couple rules of thumb where I genuinely think if you find a practice that fits these criteria, you should purchase it instead of doing a startup.
Okay.
So for an acquisition, we actually have a 3-part podcast series. If ever anyone wants to check out, do you mind if I plug our podcast? If anybody wants to check this out?
Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead.
So if people go to idealpractices.com, you can find our blog there, our podcast blog. The Ideal Practices podcast, you can find on iTunes. You can find it on that website. If you go there, you can download a 3-part series on startup versus acquisition. So what I'm about to describe in just a couple bullet points actually turns into a 3-hour discussion with myself and a few other key team members. So it's kind of a behind the curtain listen in on a conversation that really details out the nuts and bolts and all the numbers and the pros and cons of startup versus acquisition. However, that being said, I do think an acquisition can be better and sometimes is actually best if it fits these criteria. Number one, I believe a startup, an existing practice that you're going to acquire should be producing over $1 million. And some people say, whoa, $1 million practice. I don't know if I want to buy $1 million practice right out of the gates. Well, I can assure you that there are plenty of non-$1 million practices that end up taking forever to get to a point where the doctor can sustain a full-time income in that practice. Why is that? Well, one of the reasons that is because practices that are doing less than $1 million on average, it's a rule of thumb. It's not a hardcore truth. It's a rule of thumb. But on average, existing practices that are doing less than $1 million, they don't really have systems. They don't really have good protocol. They don't really have good, dependable processes that run the business. It's more one guy or one woman forcing the business to work instead of the practice working for the practice owner. So the $1 million range is a good benchmark in terms of profitability, or production rather. The second piece that I think is really important is that the practice fits the culture that you decide you want. So please, for the love of everything in dentistry, please do not try to purchase a practice that you hope to transform the culture of. Why? Because if those patients have been accepting treatment for the last 20-some years in a way that you don't really agree with, or if the previous owner has been allowing things to linger and patients think that's acceptable for the last couple decades, what makes any doctor think they can unwind a couple decades of patient training in just a couple years? Actually, on the culture topic, a topic that we like to talk through is how a surfer dentist should only purchase a surfer dentist's practice.
Oh, okay.
So what I mean by that is, you can imagine the culture thing that, surfers have a typical, you're from California, you're in, what is it, San Luis Obispo, right?
Yeah.
I used to live in Santa Barbara, so beautiful part of the country you're in. And typically speaking, a surfer has a value system and a culture system. And I actually interviewed a doctor who was a surfer dentist who did purchase another surfer dentist's practice. And the concept is that it fit. The cultures fit just right. Now, I don't just mean that your hobbies should align with the practice owner of the practice you're looking to purchase, but I do mean that the values that you have, the clinical expectations you have, all the deep-rooted beliefs about business ownership, the way patients are treated, the way team members are treated, all those intangibles, that's your surfer dentist mentality, right? Whatever your description of you being a surfer dentist, make sure you're purchasing the practice of somebody who has that same exact philosophy: clinical, business, personal, financial. Otherwise, you will spend years and years and years trying to unwind that. And look on Dentaltown or any other forum out there, you will find people screaming about how long it takes to unwind all this stuff in a facility they didn't like in the first place, with old equipment they didn't want to purchase in the first place. So if it fits your values and your culture, like a surfer dentist, purchasing a surfer dentist practice, and it's doing over $1 million in production, I think in those cases, it's a really good idea to consider that one of the top priorities for an acquisition.
Yeah.
But again, that has nothing to do with the 13 stages, right? The 13 stages is specifically and exclusively for opening new practices. Oh, by the way, if the people go to idealpractices.com/13, idealpractices.com/13, we'll give them free access to the graph, and we'll give them free access to a little booklet that we created and a video training on the topic of the 13 stages, if that's helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. One last question, because you talked about how marketing ties into your program. At what stage of these 13 stages, or maybe it's multiple stages, What kind of marketing do you talk about in your program?
Yeah, great question. Did you watch the Super Bowl this year? The Falcons and the Patriots?
I did not. I'm not a football guy.
Okay.
Yeah, not even the Super Bowl.
I'm not either. It's okay. I'm not either. I'm not a football guy, but I was one of the weirdos who stayed up. It was that Super Bowl that went really, really late, and it was the biggest comeback in football, in Super Bowl football history, right?
Yeah,
You probably
yeah.
heard the stories. Biggest comeback ever. Tom Brady is now the winningest quarterback in all of Super Bowl history or all football history. So, granted, at the end of the Super Bowl, Tom Brady is standing on the podium. I want to answer your question about some of the marketing ideas. Tom Brady is standing on the podium getting ready to receive his trophy. Spoiler alert, if you didn't watch the Super Bowl, now you know Tom Brady and the Patriots won. So Tom Brady is standing on the podium with Terry Bradshaw, one of the famous broadcasters in football. Excuse me, I just pulled out my headset from my computer. So Tom Brady is standing on the podium and he's getting ready to talk to Terry Bradshaw. Can you still hear me okay? I just put my thing back in.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah, it's good.
So he's standing there with his trophy and the confetti is kind of falling all over the place. And he's trying to talk into the microphone. The confetti's falling in his mouth and he's just having a terrible time. And Terry Bradshaw says, so Tom Brady, tell us, what's the #1 play that made this whole thing come together for you? What's the #1 play that had you guys win the Super Bowl? And he holds the microphone up. And Tom Brady in his wisdom says, you know, if any single play from this game didn't go exactly the way it did, we would have had a very different outcome. So the reason I bring that up is because I have found many times that the marketing topic actually, to point out to your question, the marketing topic of startups, many people have felt that the marketing topic alone is one of the most important. I like to say that the 13 stages process is much more fluid and organic than that, where all the stages actually blend together. And a little like what Tom Brady said, if you tried to make just the marketing topic or any other topic be the standalone topic, you could have a very different outcome. And for a Super Bowl winner, a very different outcome is really win or lose, right? Mm-hmm. So my hope is to say that, hey, listen, these 13 stages, they have to all blend together. They have to all work together. They're symbiotic. So what do I mean? I wrote a book, it's a bestseller called Choosing the Right Practice Location. It's actually for your viewers, do you mind if I give them a way to get a copy for free?
Absolutely. Yeah, let's do that.
So it's very specifically about choosing a practice location for dentists. So you can check it out on Amazon anytime if you want. It's still available for sale. But if you go to idealpractices.com/free, idealpractices.com/free, we're in the middle of 1,000 book giveaway. So if there are still copies available when you're watching this, you can go there and you can try to pick one up. I just ask that you help me offset the cost of shipping because I don't want to lose my shirt in giving away books. So if people want to go get that. So I'm bringing up the location topic, where you should open your practice, because your marketing strategies need to play in to your location. Yes. Your location should be symbiotic with your marketing strategies. I just got off the phone this morning with a client. He is in, I won't say his exact town, he's a specialist in Texas. And we were talking through how his choice of philanthropy will affect his grand opening and will affect his overall marketing strategy. Same strategies we go through with all of our clients. So to the point of marketing, if it is attempted as a one-shot deal, or if it's attempted as a sort of a magic bullet strategy, if I just do this one thing, then I'll have tons of patients. No. That's a tactic. Tactics don't work. Tactics flame out. What you really need is a strategy, an overarching strategy that combines things like a marketing agency, that combines half a dozen or more different tactics that fall under this umbrella of a strategy, a philanthropic element of your overarching strategy. So all these pieces together with your location and the way you communicate with patients, that's all marketing. So all of that together is absolutely crucial when opening up a new practice. Those things are absolutely necessary to have them be more symbiotic in this process, as opposed to looking for a one-shot marketing deal. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And you know what? It's something that I talk about all the time on Dental Town and on my podcast and my blog is dentists talk about how they need, air quotes for the audio only, need SEO. Like that's just something you have to do. And it's not. I mean, what does that even mean? First of all, most dentists don't know what's being done, nor do they care. And then they don't know what to expect, nor do they think about it. So it's like the SEO is inherently nebulous because there's no exact blueprint. Although I've created a system that predictably works, but the fact is Google isn't releasing all their algorithms, just a number of the most important ones. And
well, to your point, I completely agree. I think too many doctors are told, yeah, we do SEO too. Right?
Yeah.
Like you do SEO?
Yeah, that doesn't.
Is that something I check off a list? What is that? Well, you and I both know, as existing business owners, you and I both know that SEO is an actual ongoing, permanent black hole of effort. Like you could go down this hole forever on the topic of SEO. I love what you do because how you help support people on this very complex topic, and your clients know, it's not a check off the list topic. It's an endeavor. It's a full-blown necessary process. It's not, let me fill out the form and create something on my website. Thank God I'm done with SEO now. Doesn't really work that way, right?
Yeah, and if you're in a 2-horse town, you might be able to just throw up that website. But yeah, to your point, I mean, it's a foot race. If you're in Charlotte, North Carolina, Miami, Florida, New York, that's a different game than San Luis Obispo, California. And so I've helped a number of clients. I know we both need to go real soon, but I've helped a number of clients where it was kind of a silver bullet moment where it's like, okay, we're on page 10 and now we're at the top of page 1 because we made this one little tweak. The problem is no one ever asked how many new patients are we actually going to get from that move. And so I created a system called Scoping your keywords, where you actually see before you invest in SEO, before you decide, well, the budget for this thing that I don't understand and I don't know what's going on and I don't know what it'll bring me is $300 per month. That's the most insane way to approach marketing I've ever heard of, and yet that's how 95% of dentists are doing it. They say, well, Doc down the street, Doc in the box is doing SEO. So I'm going to, Google dental SEO expert and I'm going to find the dental marketing guy and I'm just going to say, I've got $300 and can you make this happen for me? Well, what is this? What exactly is this? And so that's why I like talking to people like you, is because when you talk about being selective and you talk about, an application process, that's a very good sign to me, because it means that you're not a cookie cutter, one size fits all approach.
No, there's no way to cookie cutter startups. It is one of the most, I'll say this as gently as possible, it is one of the most laborious yet fulfilling things that my team and I get to experience, because we get to know that, yes, it takes us a full year and more to open a practice that represents a doctor completely, that kind of helps them communicate their passions, their desires, their values, their expectations for their practice in their way, in their community. It takes a year or more. So we need to make sure that we're supporting people who want to create something incredible, who are desiring to make an impact in their community and change lives, not just make a quick buck and fly, but people who want to change lives, change communities, do good. Those are the kinds of people that we really like supporting. It's incredible when you tie together strong values with strong ambition. When those two things combine for startups, it's really powerful.
That's excellent. That's excellent. So, yeah, I mean, if you're a dental student and you're listening, I mean, like you said, 209 patients right out the gate. That's because of planning. So if you're not even a dentist yet, you are in the ideal position, not to play off your brand name, but you're in the ideal position to, I mean, this is the time to think about marketing, is if you're in dental school, and it's never really too late. I mean, this is the time to think about building the practice that you want. And I love what you've brought out Jayme, and you're such a legend on Dental Town with your blogs and your podcasts and all that. It was kind of funny at the Townie meeting. Howard Fran was like, "Who's Jayme Amos?" And I'm like sitting there in the front row. I'm like, "What do you mean, who's Jayme Amos?" He's like, "Yeah, he's got like 400 million views or whatever, 400,000 views. I don't know what it was." He's like, "He's got the most viewed blog on Dental Town ever." And I'm like, "Come on, man, you know who that is." And so he must be getting old or something. But yeah. So I really appreciate everything you do. And yeah, if there's maybe one last, before we close our show, if there's one last tip, just kind of like that Brady moment where you can kind of give those words of wisdom, what's the one thing you'd like to leave? Maybe let's say dental students or new dentists. What's the one word of advice you would have for them?
Define what you want. Define what you want for your career. I assure you there is a good, predictable, proven path, even with startups, that has almost zero typical risks, nearly zero. You can be like the doctor I mentioned. I can give you countless examples like that one, but doctors who are commercial real estate owners, who are with a startup practice, they took no money out of their pocket. They owned their own commercial real estate. They had hundreds of patients in their first month. They have over $1 million of production in their first year, who are making a huge impact in their community, transforming lives in and outside of their practice, who are creating a legacy for themselves, and who are just thrilled to show up to work every day because they have a facility that represents all their values. So when patients walk in the door, they get it. They understand how much you care. They understand how much you value your career. You can take control of your future in dentistry, but you must define what you want first. So define it.
Excellent.
And then we can help you do the rest from there.
That's excellent. Excellent. Well, all right. So you guys have just the website. Let's plug the website one more time. What's the
so I mentioned there's idealpractices.com/13 if you want to get the free 13 stages graph. And I also mentioned idealpractices.com/free if people would like to go there and get a free copy of our best-selling book.
Between those two things, they got a lot of homework.
Yeah, there's a lot to learn.
Yeah.
Yep.
Cool.
Good
All
stuff.
right. Well, thank you so much. It's been a huge honor to have you on, Jayme, and thanks for watching the Dental Marketing Guy show.